Hello, I thought I'd make the most of starting this conversation about coercive control because I had lots of comments about, what people think. Sorry, I'm holding a spoon. I'm in a rush to make this video. Lots of people have been giving their views on whether this is a problem, Jonah Hill's behaviour, or whether it isn't, under the last video I put out. And I'm so pleased that you've all been doing that. I'm also really pleased that the people who have disagreed with me have managed to get their points across but still be generally respectful to people. The people who didn't agree with what I was saying about Jonah Hill, there are a couple of things that I think are important to cover. One of those things I'm going to talk about at the end of the video because I think it's less important, and that is whether Sarah Brady was or wasn't abusive and the relevance or irrelevance of that. And I'm putting that to later because a lot of people won't care about that. They just want to know about coercive control. Another thing I want to talk about, I think is really important, and that's about the timing of when these texts were sent by Jonah Hill. If Jonah Hill had met Sarah Brady, they'd gone on a first date, he'd never looked at her Instagram, he had no idea what she did, what she posted. And if he had said to her, right, the kind of girl I want to have a relationship with is somebody who wouldn't post pictures of herself on social media unless she's fully clothed, but never in swimwear. That's something I really don't like. Yeah, it's my issue, but I just can't handle that in a relationship. Then that would not be coercive control, even though he would be saying that if this is what she does, he doesn't want to be with her. It still wouldn't be coercive control. It would suggest that he has an issue, like with jealousy and a lot of insecurity, and it's something that I think he would be right to work on in himself, but it wouldn't be coercive control. And the reason for that is because it's the beginning and the other person has a genuine choice. It's not a threat. Coercive control is about making somebody do something. He waited until she was in love with him. So all the people who are saying, yeah, but she could easily just walk away. She could say, oh, that's what you want. Fair enough. I want something else. And she could leave him. What's the big problem? They're missing the fact that by this point, she's already involved with him. And that's intentional. Somebody doesn't use coercive control until they get to that point because they know that they're not going to be able to have control over that person until they're trapped. If he said, look, I've noticed you have all these pictures on your Instagram and I don't like that. So if you want to see me for a second date, I would expect you to take them all down. I would put money on him never getting a second date with her had he said that. Coercive control is something that happens very gradually once the other person is involved enough to become vulnerable and trapped in that relationship. And they're trapped by a lie. They're trapped by the lie about who the abuser really is and how they really see the person who becomes the victim. So in other words, when the love bombing is going on at the beginning, they form an opinion about the abuser's character and about how the abuser views them. They believe that the abuser accepts them unconditionally because that is how he or she behaves. And that's not normal in an adult romantic relationship. They're not supposed to be about unconditional love. This is more like the sort of love that someone would be drawn to if they didn't get that when they were a kid, when they were supposed to be getting unconditional love. So there's a certain kind of person who is drawn to a controlling partner, and that's the kind of person who didn't get what they needed growing up and who therefore becomes reliant on what they get from that abusive partner when the abusive partner is love bombing them. So in other words, when they're actually not being real, when they're giving them all of this fake love, they're putting them on a pedestal, they're telling them they're wonderful, they act like they fully accept them, there wouldn't have been any sign that Jonah Hill had a problem with the photographs on her Instagram page when they first met. And he wouldn't have told her that a week later or a month later. Yeah, I think that would be very unlikely. He would have waited until she's at a point where she is emotionally involved enough with him and reliant enough on all of the validation she gets from him before he would have told her, right, you need to change this, this, and this, or I'm out. You know, and so it's really not as simple as some people might think it is. They've had all of this wonderful, what felt like love and support unconditionally. You know, there's a lot for somebody to lose. And if they've got to the point where this person has made them feel really confident, it tends to be somebody who doesn't feel that confident. You know, somebody who does have a lot of underlying insecurities, who is drawn into a relationship with a controlling person. And so that person, once all of the validation is suddenly taken away and they're under this big threat, it's like they're scrambling to hold on to this person. They feel like they need this person. You know, they're so used to depending on them and they're so used to getting all of this positive feedback from them. The problem with coercive control is it happens in stages. And it often starts with something that seems small, like, oh, could you not use that word? Could you use a different word? Could you not say, I'm worried about you? Could you say, I'm concerned about you? Because worried feels patronizing. You know, that's how it can start. And the other person can think, oh, well, that's okay. Yeah, it's not a big thing to change. And then it gets worse. Then it becomes, could you not wear that top? You're showing too much cleavage. Or could you not wear that skirt? It's way too short. And then it becomes, you're a slut. You know, it can get more and more aggressive. There's a threat that he's going to leave Sarah Brady if she doesn't change her behaviour and fall under his control in these various ways. I'm going to quote Women's Aid in the UK on the meaning of coercive control, because I think they're going to be a good, reliable source of information. So they say coercive control is an act or a pattern of acts of assaults, threats, humiliation, and intimidation or other abuse that is used to harm, punish, or frighten their victim. This threat that Jonah Hill is making is to end the relationship. That's already a really big threat, and it's a much bigger threat than I think a lot of people seem to realise. Was Jonah Hill expecting Sarah Brady to say, oh, okay, yeah, no, I understand, it's sad, but sure, yeah, maybe you should leave? Or was he expecting that Sarah Brady would be afraid of losing him? Was he expecting it was going to make her anxious and scared? He tried to say it in a kind of casual way, as if it was the former, as if he was being reasonable. But that comes across to me as manipulation. Going by the character that comes through from him in this text, I'm pretty sure it was the latter. And then they say this controlling behaviour is designed to make a person dependent by isolating them from support, exploiting them, depriving them of their independence, and regulating their everyday behaviour. Wanting to know where you are at all times, who you're with, wanting to text with you at all times. You might remember in the last video I talked about that. Controlling the body. They don't just want to control how you behave, they want to control how you look, what you can and can't wear, what you can eat and drink, how you groom and present yourself, how often you exercise. And this can get as bad as not allowing you to get medical attention, not allowing you to sleep as long as you want to sleep. But again, this is in stages. So they're talking about the most drastic things. That's not going to happen within the first few months of a relationship, because every abuser knows that no one is going to want to be with them if they're going to behave like that. So this happens very subtly. It happens over time. Part of coercive control is degrading you. Abusers might call their victims names, insult them, constantly criticize how they do things, bully and belittle them. That's what is happening in Jonah Hill's text, and I think a lot of people can't see that. They can't see what he's saying, implying she is wearing slutty swimwear, she has terrible judgment about her female friends, like she doesn't have boundaries with her male friends, like she can't seem to have normal relationships. So in other words, there's something wrong with her is what he's implying, because she has totally inappropriate relationships with these women from her recent wild past. So as if recently she's had this crazy past where she's been completely out of control and done insane, you know, maybe she just slept with a few men, you know, and he just can't handle that. So, and then on top of that, he's saying she has boundaryless relationships with men. So all of these things he's saying imply that she has a series of pretty serious issues with herself, you know, and therefore he's perfectly justified in asking her to change these things. In reality, he is the one with the issue. So he is belittling her, he is degrading her, he is humiliating her. That is what his text is doing. When that person turns on them and starts to degrade them, starts to say, actually, I don't like this about you, there's something wrong with you. The person who has been love bombed is kind of stunned, and they weren't prepared for that because they trusted this controlling person. And so they don't have any defenses against this because it completely takes them by surprise. Jealousy and possessiveness, that's also part of coercive control. Controlling partners often act jealous and possessive to reduce their victims' contact with the outside world. And that's that is what he's doing. He's saying, don't have relationships with these men. They're her friends, but she's not allowed to be friends with them anymore. She's not allowed to see these female friends unless it's for lunch, you know, so she can't see them in the evenings.
These homicides are the most predictable homicides that there are. These are the ones that we have the best chance of preventing. And that's why I'm doing this work. In nearly every case, we noticed that the perpetrator had a history of coercive control or stalking or domestic abuse. And that history does not have to be a record. It could actually just be allegations from ex-partners. This stage is where two people have just met and they're thinking of forming a relationship. But in this stage, everything seems to be speeded up, almost twice the speed of what you would expect from a normal relationship. So maybe moving in together very, very early, declaring love very, very early. The two people are now in a relationship, and it's dominated by coercive control, stalking, domestic abuse. So lots of controlling behaviours. So perhaps the victim isn't allowed to go out when she wants to, or perhaps not dress in the way that she wants to, becomes isolated from her family, that kind of thing. This was an interesting stage because this was when risk really started to rise. So it's something that happens that threatens the amount of control that the perpetrator has over the victim or the relationship. Most of the time, that threat comes from separation. So when a person feels that they're losing control, what they will usually do, because it's really important to them to have control, is to try and get that control back. And that's when we see the behaviours in stage 5, which we call an escalation. So those controlling behaviours will get more frequent or maybe more severe. This is quite a difficult stage to see, but it's when the perpetrator makes a decision as to how they're going to deal with the loss of control. Sometimes they will just form a new relationship and go on to their next victim. Sometimes the victim will go back and they go back to stage 3. But sometimes this is the stage they make the decision that they're going to kill someone.
Now, in Jonah Hill's case, he did have someone lined up straight away, and that's very common in an abusive person, that, you know, that they need narcissistic supply. So if they can't get it from the person they're with, they're going to be looking for it outside of that relationship, and they're going to line that person up so that they can move smoothly from one relationship straight into the other. They're not going to make themselves vulnerable, because if they were vulnerable and if they didn't have someone lined up, then they've got something to lose. That they then become, you know, they're then in the same position as the partner is, where they don't have authority over the other person. And that's terrifying. Coercive control is about getting the other person to emotionally regulate you, because you can't do that by yourself, because you have such strong emotions that come from your insecurities that you don't feel okay and you don't feel secure in a normal relationship. So you have to control the other person, whether that's in obvious ways or subtle ways or both. So when I was talking about whether it was a good thing or not that the texts were released, I may have put it in a way that came across as confusing, because I said, did she do the right thing to release the texts? What I really meant was, do I think it's a good thing that the texts are out there? She may have released these texts for the wrong reasons, but that again, that's not what I'm focused on. If she released the text because she's bitter about him having a baby with someone, that doesn't really have anything to do with what I'm talking about in terms of coercive control. While we're on that topic, I also want to say that if someone has been in a relationship where they're being abused, it's very normal that after a while they end up, being nasty themselves in some way, because they're going to get more and more angry at the way they're being treated. So it's common that you don't have one person who's really mean and the other person's just a saint, So it would make sense anyway, even if she wasn't abusive, it would still make sense that she would do something to get revenge on someone who has been abusive towards her. So I hope that was helpful. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.